It took exactly 58 seconds, 47 rounds, 0 misses. When the smoke cleared and the range fell silent, Gunnery Sergeant Hale stood frozen behind the safety line, his stopwatch still running in his hand. He'd been doing this for 3 decades. He'd trained Marines, Rangers, even a few SEALs, but he'd never seen anything like what he just witnessed. And the woman who did it? She didn't celebrate, didn't smile. She just safed her weapon, set it down, and walked off the line like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Because she had. 6 hours earlier, none of them knew who she was. The day started at Camp Lejeune's Range 400 in North Carolina. Tuesday morning, 6:15 a.m. November air sharp and cold. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Hale unlocked the armory, pulled 17 M4 carbines, and started his inspection routine. He'd been running this range since 2019. His reputation was simple. Pass his course, you could shoot. Fail it, you shouldn't touch a rifle. No middle ground. Recruits arrived at 7 a.m. Young faces, nervous energy. Hale watched from the tower, mentally cataloging who would pass and who would wash out. Then at 7:48 a.m., she walked onto the range. Civilian clothes. No gear, no uniform. Just a woman in her mid-30s wearing a gray jacket and jeans, carrying a small black duffel. She didn't check in. Didn't announce herself. Just walked straight to the equipment table and examined the rifles like she owned them. Hale climbed down from the tower, ready to redirect her, when Lieutenant Voss intercepted him. The lieutenant handed him a file folder. Inside, temporary access authorization signed by the base commander. Second page heavily redacted, but 3 words visible at the top. Special Operations Background. Hale closed the folder and looked at her again. First flicker of doubt. He approached her. She was checking an M4's bolt carrier group with practiced efficiency. Hale waited. She didn't acknowledge him, just kept working. He cleared his throat. She looked up, eyes meeting his without hesitation. No nervousness, no deference, just calm measurement. 2 seconds, then back to the rifle. Hale's irritation spiked. He'd dealt with arrogant shooters before. They rarely delivered. He gestured toward the observation area behind the tower. She pulled the charging handle, checked the chamber, set the weapon down. Her response came without looking at him, voice quiet but firm. She wasn't here to observe. Hale's jaw tightened. Other recruits were watching now. He couldn't lose control of his range. Protocol demanded she check in at the tower first, receive safety briefing, wait for instructions. She picked up the rifle, slung it over her shoulder with casual familiarity, and walked toward the firing line without another word. Hale stood there 3 seconds, processing, before turning to Corporal Mendez. Orders given quickly. Keep eyes on her. First safety violation. She's gone. Mendez nodded, though uncertainty showed in his expression. At 8:15 a.m., Hale called the first firing order. 10 shooters to the line. The woman wasn't among them. She waited at the end, weapon slung, hands at her sides, staring downrange like she was already calculating distances and wind speed. Hale watched through binoculars as the first group engaged. Decent performance, few misses. He logged scores, brought up the second group. This time she moved forward. Lane 7. Between Private Ramos and a nervous recruit named Jacobs. Hale zoomed in. Her stance was textbook. Feet shoulder width, weight balanced, rifle seated properly. But form didn't guarantee performance. He keyed his radio, gave the command. All shooters, Weapons Condition 1. Prepare to engage targets at 50 meters. 60 seconds. On my mark. Pause. Mark given. The range erupted. 10 rifles firing in controlled bursts. Hale kept his binoculars on her. She fired methodically. No rush. No hesitation. Each shot deliberate. 60 seconds ended. Ceasefire called. Shooters safed weapons and stepped back. Range officers moved downrange to score. Hale walked the line, checking each lane. Ramos, 38 out of 40. Solid. Jacobs, 22. Barely passing. He reached lane 7 and stopped. The target was pristine. 40 rounds fired. 40 hits. Every single one center mass. No flyers. No misses. Not one. Hale stared at the target, then looked back. The woman was already clearing her weapon, ejecting the magazine, locking the bolt, efficiency that only came from thousands of repetitions. Hale walked back to her lane. She glanced at him briefly, then continued. He wanted to ask where she trained, what unit. Pride stopped him. He nodded and moved on. But his mind was working. This wasn't talent. This was something else entirely. At 9:30 a.m., Hale ran the 100-meter course. Same format. 60 seconds. 40 rounds. Difficulty increased significantly. Wind became a factor. Elevation adjustments mattered. Most recruits would drop 5 to 10 rounds. She stepped to lane 4, checked her optics, made slight windage adjustment, settled into stance. Mark called. She fired. Hale kept binoculars locked on her, breathing controlled. 2 breaths between shots. Trigger finger moved with mechanical precision. No jerking, no anticipation. Smooth, consistent pressure. Ceasefire came. Target scored. 40 for 40. Recruits started noticing. Whispers spread along the line. Who was she? Where did she come from? Hale shut it down immediately. Orders barked. Clear weapons. Prepare for next evolution. But he couldn't shut down his own thoughts. 2 consecutive flawless runs wasn't luck. It was high-level training compressed into muscle memory, the kind that came with a unit designation and deployment record. He radioed Lieutenant Voss, asked for more information. Voss's response came back brief and unhelpful. Cleared by base commander. That's all Hale needed to know. He didn't like it. Didn't have a choice. Continued qualification. By 11 a.m., they'd completed the 200-meter course. Her score remained unchanged. Recruits weren't whispering anymore. They were staring. Even Mendez, who'd been running ranges for 8 years, looked unsettled. Hale called a 15-minute break and retreated to the tower. Sat down with his thermos of coffee, tried to process what he was seeing. 32 years. He'd never witnessed a qualification run like this. Close attempts, yes. 38 out of 40, 39 out of 40, those happened. But this level of consistency across multiple distances? Statistically improbable. Unless the shooter wasn't a recruit, unless she was something else entirely. At 11:20 a.m., Hale made another call to Voss, asked directly if she was here to qualify or for some other purpose. Pause on the other end. Then Voss's careful voice came through. She's here to qualify, Gunny. Treat her like any other shooter. Hale wanted to argue she wasn't like any other shooter. Held his tongue. Orders were orders. He ended the call, climbed back down. Afternoon evolution about to begin. The stress course. The stress course wasn't part of standard qualification. Hale had designed it himself as a final test for Marines heading to advanced training. It combined physical exertion with live fire, running, carrying weight, firing under time pressure. Most shooters saw their accuracy drop by 30 to 40% under stress. Heart rates spiked, breathing became ragged, fine motor control deteriorated. It was brutal, realistic, and exactly what separated range shooters from combat shooters. 300-meter sprint to the first station, 10 rounds on target. Low crawl 50 meters to the second station, 10 more rounds. Firemen carry a 150-pound dummy another 100 meters. Final station, 27 rounds rapid fire. Total time limit, 5 minutes. Total rounds, 47. Passing score, 35 hits. The recruits looked nervous when Hale explained the course. A few exchanged worried glances. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. But the woman's expression didn't change. She just listened, nodded once, and moved to the start line when her turn came. Hale positioned himself at the final firing station with his stopwatch and binoculars. He wanted to see this up close. At 1:15 p.m., he raised his hand and gave the mark. She exploded off the line. Not jogging, sprinting, full speed. Her boots hit the dirt in a steady rhythm, and by the time she reached the first station, her breathing was elevated but controlled. She dropped into position, acquired her target, and started firing. 10 rounds, 10 hits. No hesitation. She was up and moving again before Hale even logged her time. The low crawl section slowed most shooters down. Dragging yourself through 50 meters of dirt while keeping your rifle clean wasn't easy. The woman moved through it like she'd done it before, elbows driving forward, knees pulling her body along, rifle cradled across her forearms to keep it off the ground. She reached the second station, rolled into a supported prone position, and fired again. 10 rounds. 10 hits. Hale's stopwatch read 2 minutes, 18 seconds. She was ahead of pace. Then came the fireman carry. The 180-pound dummy was designed to simulate a wounded teammate plus combat gear. Most recruits struggled with it, especially after the sprint and crawl. Some failed entirely. The woman hoisted it onto her shoulders without breaking stride and started moving. Her pace slowed, but not by much. Hale watched through the binoculars as she covered the 100 meters, breathing hard now. Sweat visible on her forehead, but still moving with purpose. She dropped the dummy at the final station, grabbed her rifle, and took position. This was the moment most shooters fell apart. Heart rate through the roof, muscles fatigued, vision narrowing from oxygen debt. Hale expected her accuracy to drop. It didn't. She fired 27 rounds in rapid succession. The sound was almost continuous. Brass casings ejected in a golden arc, piling up beside her. When the last round left the barrel, she safed the weapon, set it down, and stood up. Hale clicked his stopwatch. 58 seconds. Total time for the entire course, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. He lowered the stopwatch and stared at it, not quite believing what he'd just witnessed. Then he grabbed his radio and called for the range officers to check the final target. The response came back 30 seconds later. 47 rounds fired. 47 hits. Under maximum stress. In record time. Hale stood there in silence, the radio still in his hand, trying to reconcile what he'd just seen with everything he thought he knew about shooting. This wasn't talent. This wasn't even standard training. This was years of deployment compressed into reflexes so deep they bypassed conscious thought entirely. He walked down to the final station where the woman was wiping down her rifle with a cleaning rag. She didn't look up when he approached, just kept working, methodical and calm, like she hadn't just shattered every record on his range. Hale stopped a few feet away. For the first time all day, he didn't know what to say. The woman finished cleaning the bolt carrier group, reassembled the rifle, and stood up. She looked at him for a moment, and in that moment Hale saw something he hadn't noticed before. Not pride, not satisfaction, just exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying weight nobody else could see. She handed him the rifle without a word, picked up her duffel bag, and started walking toward the parking area. Hale watched her go, questions piling up in his mind. But he didn't call after her. Some things weren't meant to be asked. At 2 p.m., Lieutenant Voss appeared at the tower. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking out at the range, hands in his pockets. Finally, he spoke. Former CAG Combat Applications Group. Delta Force, 12 years of deployments. Retired 8 months ago. She was part of the first female cohort accepted into CAG selection. Only one who made it through. Hale absorbed this information in silence. CAG. That explained everything. And nothing. Voss continued. She's consulting now. Teaching courses. The base commander wanted her qualified on our systems before she started training some of our advanced infantry units. Hale nodded slowly. That made sense. Delta operators were the best shooters in the world. Of course she'd run a flawless qualification. But that didn't answer the question burning in his mind. Why was she here, running a basic course, when she could be anywhere else? Voss seemed to read his thoughts. She requested it. Said she wanted to see how standard infantry trained, wanted to understand the baseline before she started teaching. Hale turned that over in his mind. Most high-speed operators he'd met had an ego. They knew they were the best, and they made sure everyone else knew it too. But this woman hadn't said a word, hadn't bragged, hadn't even mentioned her background. She'd just shown up, done the work, and left. That kind of quiet competence was rare. It was also, Hale realized, exactly what made someone dangerous. Not the ones who talked, the ones who didn't. Voss handed him a card. A name was printed on it. Elena Cade. Below that, a phone number. If you want to know more, call her, but don't expect her to talk about the work. She won't. Voss walked away, leaving Hale standing alone on the range. That evening, at 6:30 p.m., Hale sat in his office at the base, staring at the card. He'd spent the afternoon replaying the day in his mind. The flawless shots, the effortless movement, the complete absence of stress markers. He'd trained thousands of Marines. He thought he'd seen everything. But Elena Cade had shown him something different. Not just skill, mastery. The kind that only came from years of doing something at the highest possible level. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then dialed the number. It rang 3 times before she answered. Cade. Her voice was the same as it had been on the range. Quiet. Controlled. Hale introduced himself, then paused, unsure how to phrase what he wanted to ask. Finally, he just said it directly. Why didn't you tell me who you were? There was silence on the other end. Then, softly, she replied. Would it have changed anything? Hale thought about that. Would it? If he'd known she was Delta from the start, would he have treated her differently? Probably. He would have expected this outcome. And in expecting it, he would have missed the point. She wasn't there to prove anything to him. She was there to do the work, that was all. He thanked her for her time and ended the call. Then he sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, and allowed himself a small, rueful smile. In 32 years, he'd thought he knew what made a good shooter. Turns out he'd been wrong. The best shooters didn't need to prove anything. They just showed up, did the work, and left. And sometimes, that was the most unsettling revelation of all. 3 days passed. Friday morning at 9 a.m., Lieutenant Voss walked into Hale's office, holding a classified briefing folder marked with red tape. The kind that meant whatever was inside had real-world consequences. He dropped it on Hale's desk without ceremony. Hale was being assigned as observer to a joint training exercise. Started Monday, Fort Liberty. Elena Cade was running it. Hale looked up from his coffee. Observer meant watching, documenting, reporting back to command on whether her techniques should be integrated into standard qualification protocols. Voss opened the folder. Inside were course outlines, training schedules, and a roster of participants. 24 Marine infantry officers. All combat veterans. All with at least 2 deployments. This wasn't basic training. This was advanced tactical instruction for people who already knew how to fight. And Cade was teaching them. Hale asked what the training focus was. Decision-making under extreme stress, Voss explained. She calls it reality-based engagement protocol. Command wants to know if it's legitimate or just another tactical fad. Hale closed the folder. Part of him was curious. The other part was skeptical. He'd seen plenty of outside consultants come through with revolutionary training methods that turned out to be recycled basics wrapped in new terminology. But Cade wasn't like other consultants. She'd proven that on his range. He nodded once. Monday morning, 5:30 a.m. Hale arrived at Fort Liberty's Combat Training Center. The facility was designed for live-fire exercises, urban warfare simulations, and stress inoculation training. 24 Marine officers were assembled in the briefing room when he walked in. They looked tired already, like they'd been awake for hours. One of them, a captain named Reeves, glanced at Hale as he took a seat in the back. The captain mentioned they'd been there since 3 a.m. No warm-ups, just straight into scenarios. Before Hale could respond, the door opened and Elena Cade walked in. Same gray jacket, same calm expression. She moved to the front of the room, set down a tablet, and looked at the assembled officers. No introduction, no pleasantries, just direct engagement. She tapped her tablet, and a video feed appeared on the screen behind her. It showed a street in an urban environment. Civilians moving. Market stalls. Normal activity. Then, in the bottom right corner, a figure appeared, carrying something. The angle made it impossible to tell what it was. Could be a weapon. Could be groceries. The video froze. Cade told them they had 3 seconds to decide. Engage or hold fire. Go. No one moved. The silence stretched. Cade didn't break it. Just waited. Finally, Captain Reeves spoke up. Need more information. Can't make that call. Cade's expression didn't change. She informed them the figure turns toward a crowd. Decision required now. Reeves hesitated. Another officer, Lieutenant Marsh, spoke. Hold fire. Can't confirm threat. Cade tapped the tablet. The video resumed. The figure turned. It was a child carrying a bundle of fabric. Not a threat. Marsh exhaled. Cade looked at him, her voice level but cutting. Correct decision. Wrong reasoning. He held fire because he was afraid of making a mistake. Fear-based decisions get people killed. He should have held fire because the tactical situation didn't require engagement yet. There's a difference. The room went quiet. Hale watched from the back, interested now. Cade wasn't teaching marksmanship. She was teaching mindset, the kind of cognitive framework that separated operators who survived from operators who didn't. She ran them through scenario after scenario, each more complex, each requiring faster decisions with less information. By 8 a.m., the officers looked mentally exhausted. Cade called a break. As they filed out, Hale approached her. "That's not standard infantry training," he observed. She looked at him. "Standard training teaches people to follow orders. I'm teaching them to make orders when there's no one left to give them." Hale considered that. In his 32 years, he'd seen plenty of Marines who could execute flawlessly under command. He'd seen far fewer who could operate effectively when command broke down. Cade was right. That gap needed filling. Over the week, Hale watched her push the officers through progressively harder scenarios. Live fire drills where targets appeared for 1 second. Decision trees where every choice led to complications. Physical stress that degraded cognitive function intentionally. She was systematic, uncompromising, brutally effective. By Thursday afternoon, the officers who'd started skeptical were asking questions, taking notes, requesting additional scenarios. Cade ran them through hostage situations, ambush responses, civilian evacuation under fire. Each time, she forced them to articulate their reasoning, not just what they did, but why. And when they got it wrong, which happened often, she didn't criticize, just showed them the consequence chain and asked what they'd do differently. Teaching through consequence, not punishment. Hale had never seen anything like it. On Friday, the final day, Cade ran a full mission simulation. The officers were divided into teams and inserted into an urban warfare facility designed to replicate a hostile city. Live actors played civilians and hostiles. Simunition rounds replaced live ammunition. The scenario was simple. Extract a high-value target from a compound, get him to the extraction point, deal with whatever happens in between. Hale watched from the observation tower with Voss and 2 other senior officers. The first team moved in at 10 a.m. They followed standard protocols, cleared rooms methodically, secured the HVT, started moving toward extraction. Then Cade triggered the complication. A civilian actor ran into their path, screaming in simulated panic, pointing back toward the compound. The team leader, Captain Reeves, stopped, tried to assess. The civilian kept screaming. Reeves made a call, send 2 men back to investigate. The moment they split off, hostile actors appeared from 3 directions. The team was pinned. Simunition rounds hit 4 of them. Mission failed. Reeves looked frustrated as he walked off the field. Cade met him at the exit, asked what happened. Reeves answered immediately. Got tunnel vision. Focused on the civilian. Missed the setup. Cade nodded, then asked why he split his force. Reeves explained he thought someone might need help back there. Cade's response was direct. Maintaining operational focus means accepting that sometimes helping one person costs the mission. That's the decision no one wants to make, but it's the one that matters most. The second team went in at 11 a.m. Different approach, tighter formation. When the civilian appeared, they didn't split, kept moving. The civilian followed them, still screaming, then threw a simulated grenade. The team leader, Lieutenant Marsh, reacted instantly, shoved the HVT behind cover, absorbed the sim blast himself. His armor registered a hit. He was technically dead, but the HVT survived. The team completed extraction. When Marsh walked off the field, Cade was waiting. She acknowledged his decision, then asked why he chose to take the hit himself, instead of shooting the civilian before the throw or evading while protecting the HVT. Marsh hesitated, then answered that the mission was to protect the HVT. He protected him. Cade looked at him for a long moment, then spoke quietly. That's not wrong, but it's not optimal. An optimal decision keeps both you and the HVT alive. That's what training is for, expanding your decision space so you see the third option before you have to choose between two bad ones. Marsh nodded slowly. Hale, watching from the tower, felt something shift in his understanding. Cade wasn't just teaching tactics. She was teaching officers to think beyond binary choices, to see the battlefield as fluid rather than fixed. By 3 p.m., all teams had run the scenario. Cade gathered them for final debrief. She didn't congratulate anyone, didn't hand out praise, just asked one question. What did you learn? The answers came slowly at first, then faster. Reeves talked about operational focus. Marsh discussed decision expansion. Another officer mentioned cognitive load management under stress. Cade listened to all of it, nodding occasionally, then delivered her final point. They'd forget most of this in 6 months. That's normal. The brain doesn't retain lessons it doesn't use. But when they're in a situation where everything's breaking down and they have to make a call with incomplete information, they'll remember one thing. They've done this before. That memory will buy them 2 seconds of clarity, and 2 seconds is enough. She dismissed them. The officers filed out, talking amongst themselves, energy renewed despite a week of brutal training. Hale stayed behind. Cade packed up her equipment, methodical as always. He approached her and said simply that it was effective. She looked up, noting he sounded surprised. Hale admitted he was. Most consultants teach theory. She taught application. Her response was immediate. Theory doesn't save lives. Hale nodded. She finished packing, slung her bag over her shoulder. Before she could leave, Hale asked the question that had been building all week. Why did you retire? Cade stopped, looked at him. For the first time, he saw something shift in her expression. Not anger, not sadness, just exhaustion. She explained she got tired of making those decisions, the ones with no good answer. After 12 years, you start to wonder if you've lost the ability to see third options anymore. If you're just choosing between bad and worse because that's all you know how to do. She walked out. Hale stood alone in the empty facility, her words echoing in his mind. He'd spent 32 years training Marines. He'd thought he understood what made someone effective, but Elena Cade had shown him something deeper. The best operators weren't the ones who never made mistakes. They were the ones who understood the cost of every decision and made them anyway. And eventually that cost became too heavy to carry. That's what years in the field really meant. Not just the skills you gained, but the weight you carried long after you stopped using them. That night, back at Camp Lejeune, Hale wrote his report. He recommended full integration of Cade's training methods into advanced infantry qualification protocols. Recommended her as primary instructor for all senior officer tactical courses, and recommended that every Marine above the rank of captain be required to complete her reality-based engagement protocol before deployment. The report was 17 pages. He submitted it at 11:47 p.m. and went home. 2 weeks later, he received confirmation. The Marine Corps had approved all recommendations. Elena Cade would begin training cycles starting next quarter. her methods would become standard. Hale felt something close to satisfaction. In 32 years, he'd trained thousands of Marines, but it took meeting one retired Delta operator to show him what he'd been missing. The best training wasn't about making people perfect. It was about making them capable of functioning when perfection was impossible. And that, finally, was a lesson worth teaching.